Hey YouTube, Brian from channel Huckster here, and today I'm going to be showcasing my Dark Magician deck profile for the June 2020 meta. Dark Magician is one of the most iconic monsters in the 20 plus run year of Yu-Gi-Oh! And to this day, Konami still continues to give this deck more and more support, bringing in older fans who played back in the day, as well as bringing in casual new fans who just love its stun/control playstyle. So let's get right into it. First card we run, of course, the namesake of the deck, 3 Dark Magician. Not much to say about this card. Dark, level 7, vanilla spellcaster, ultimate wizard in terms of attack and defense. Everyone knows this card, and one thing that I love that Konami did with this deck over, say, Red Eyes or Blue Eyes, is that unlike those decks where you can kind of get away with cutting the vanilla monster down to maybe 2 copies, Dark Magician requires you to play 3 copies. You'll be constantly recycling this card, summoning it over and over. There's a lot you can do with it. You know, summoning it, sending it to the graveyard, fusing it. There's just a lot that this one vanilla monster can do in this deck and is mandatory to run at 3. Speaking of Dark Magician, the Ultimate Wizard, you need the Ultimate Wizard's Apprentice, Dark Magician Girl. Now this card's really controversial for Dark Magician players. Some players don't love her, some do love her. She can be a brick in the deck, but unlike other Garnets, such as, Garnet or Darlington Cobra, for instance, she's not completely dead in the hand. There's still things you can do with her. This card, I feel, the best way to describe her would be a necessary evil. You kind of need to play this card in order to actually get the second effect of one of your extra deck monsters, as well as kind of boost the power of another spell card that we'll get to later on in the deck. Overall, like I said, she can be problematic. And just letting you know right now, we're not playing the trap that lets you counter because that just kind of has issues all on its own, adding to more brickiness. But I feel the one Dark Magician Girl is almost essential to this deck if you really want to get its full benefit. Plus, it's Dark Magician. What's Dark Magician without Dark Magician Girl? Next up, we play the Stratos of the deck, 3 Magician's Rod. Like every Stratos of the deck, you want to see this card as early as possible. Magician's Rod effect is that when this card is normal summoned, you can add 1 spell or trap to your hand from your deck that specifically lists Dark Magician in its text. One thing you will notice throughout this deck profile is that Dark Magician has a couple things running throughout the deck. A lot of the cards specifically mention listing Dark Magician in its card text, as well as you'll notice that this deck has a lot of searching and draw power. Dark Magician, unlike other decks, really needs at least a minimum of 3 combo pieces in order to really play or do anything. Unlike other decks that, can pop off on 1, maybe 2 cards, this deck requires 3 at least. And this card helps you get to those pieces as fast as possible. It also has a secondary effect that when your opponent, on their turn, if you activate a spell or trap card, you can tribute a spellcaster monster and add this card from the graveyard back to your hand. That effect comes in every now and then and, is really strong in the grind game, which if you get to a later game in a duel with Dark Magician, this deck really starts to shine as it gets stronger and stronger as the turns go on. Next up, you knew this card was coming. 3 copies of Magician Souls. Yes, this unfortunately kind of is where it hurts the casual budget players coming back into Yu-Gi-Oh! After taking a break for all these years. Magician Souls has its price tag for a reason. This card is incredibly strong in other decks and is even stronger in its home deck here in Dark Magician. So what does this card do? Well, it has a cost that allows you to send a level 6 or higher spellcaster monster from your deck to the graveyard, and then you can activate a few effects from there. You can either special summon this card, or you can send this card to the graveyard from your hand to special summon 1 Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl from your graveyard, presumably the one you just sent off of its milling effect. Its secondary effect is what really helps this deck. You're allowed to, on field, you can send up to 2 spell or traps from your side of the field or hand to the graveyard in order to draw that many cards. Like I said, this deck has a lot of combo pieces, so sometimes when you get multiple copies of those combo pieces, this card allows you to send those away and try to draw into the other pieces that you don't have. Easily the best card of the deck. It's unfortunate that it does have this high of a price tag, and while there are kind of budget ways around it, if you really want to play the deck the best possible way, you do need this card at 3. One card you don't need at 3 anymore, Apprentice Illusion Magician. This card used to be a 3-of staple in the deck when you really wanted to add Dark Magician to your hand over and over and, summon him through your trap cards we'll get to. Nowadays, you'd rather pitch the Dark Magician to the graveyard here with Magician Souls, so she doesn't see as much play anymore for that reason. Some builds cut her down to 1. I still personally prefer 2, especially because I'm running the Dark Magician Girl. Because like I said, she's not completely dead in your hand, because with a card like this, her effect allows you to discard 1 card from your hand to special summon this card. And on normal or special summon, this card allows you to add a Dark Magician from your deck to your hand. Its secondary effect is a mini Honest-like effect, where whenever one of your Dark Spellcaster monsters battles, you can send her from your field or hand to the graveyard to increase that monster's attack by 2,000. Really helpful at swinging over things. Dark Magician, not the biggest attack strength. And, again, she can kind of just get rid of pieces in your hand that you don't need. And, overall is just a good body to throw on board. The other normal summon of the deck we run is the Spellbook Magician of Prophecy. Classic Blue Boy, you know where it's going. Spoiler, we do run the Spellbook Engine. You normal summon this card, add 1 Spellbook spell we'll get to, add the other off of that one, tribute this card, draw 2. Like I said, you'll notice that searching and drawing in almost every single card in this deck. It's not uncommon to go through half your deck on your first turn just to get your pieces. Spicy Tech, Dragon Buster Destruction Sword. If you see this card, you also know where this is going. We do run the Union Carrier in the extra deck. This monster, through Union Carrier's effect, can be equipped to either a dragon or a dark. Every monster in this deck, minus the blue boy, is a dark. And, a couple dragons will appear in here if you do need to play it on top of that. So, being able to just lock out your opponent from their extra deck by having this card equipped to one of your monsters really helps. And again, just builds up a board to stop your opponent and stun them like the deck wants to do. This deck isn't incredibly fast, so being able to just shut down that huge aspect of the game really helps this deck kind of get to that later game that it wants to be in. And the last monster we run is Fantastical Dragon Phantasme. This is the hand trap I prefer personally. Link monsters, even in the new Master Rule, are still prominent. Everyone's running Crystron, Needle Fiber, Halifibrax, whatever you want to call it. So this card has a couple things also going for it other than just its effect for that. It is a dark, it is a level 7, and it's a dragon. All things that this Dark Magician deck really likes to have. So other than, those, when your opponent summons a Link monster, you can special summon this card from your hand and draw cards equal to the number of Link monsters they control plus 1, then shuffle cards from your hand back into the deck equal of the Link monsters they control. So it's a nice little, plus 1 off of that, and lets you really, again, recycle through what you need for the pieces to get your deck going. It also has a secondary effect that, if your opponent tries to target one of your monsters with a card effect or monsters with a card effect, you can, negate it by discarding a card. It comes in handy sometimes, but we have a trap that, protects Dark Magician that we'll get to. But, it comes in handy sometimes, so it's not bad to have for that. And that's it for the monsters. Dark Magician historically doesn't play that high of a monster count. It's more of the spells and traps where this deck really comes in. And speaking of such spells, even after all these years, you still play it at 3, Dark Magical Circle. What does this card do? Well, when it's first activated, you can excavate the top 3 cards of your deck and look amongst them, and you can pick any one of them that specifically lists Dark Magician in its text, like Rod's effect, or a Dark Magician himself. The other 2 cards you can then place on top of your deck in any order you want. Its secondary effect is that during either player's turn, if you summon a Dark Magician, you can target 1 card your opponent controls and banishes it. Unfortunately, it's target, but, it is what it is. It's still the best spell in the deck. It helps you kind of get through a little bit. But very close as another best spell is the newer spell Soul Servant. So what does Soul Servant do? Well, Soul Servant allows you to do exactly what this deck's been doing and that I've been saying it's trying to do. You can look through your deck, graveyard, or hand if you want, and place one card that specifically lists Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl in its text, or Dark Magician himself on the top of your deck. That effect is actually not once per turn, so if you actually open up multiple of these cards, you can do it as many cards as you have. Its secondary effect is that you can banish this card from your graveyard to then draw that many cards equal to the number of Dark Magician Girl, or Palladium Oracle monsters that you have in your graveyard or on your field. I don't run the Palladium Oracle monsters. They're a little bricky. They can be fun, especially if you have all four of them. Getting +4 is nice. But they just add a little too much bricking to the deck. This right here is another reason why we run Dark Magician Girl. Instead of just being the +1 for the Dark Magician, you get that +2 from Dark Magician Girl. Really helpful. And of course, the obvious synergy with this card is that you use Dark Magical Circle to stack the card that you are choosing on top of your deck, then using Dark Magical Circle to excavate them, and obviously pick the one that you put on top. Really powerful spell, really helps increase the consistency of this deck. Definitely run at 3. The other Dark Magician spell we run is Secrets of Dark Magic. Some people run this at 2, some people run it at 1. It depends on what you want. It is searchable since it does list Dark Magician in its text. But I feel like this is a card that isn't as bad if you do open it. So what does it do? It has 2 effects. The second one, which doesn't really matter for this deck, is it can be used to ritual summon as long as you use the Dark Magician. We're not really playing the ritual build in this, so that doesn't matter. But it allows you to fusion summon one monster as long as you're using Dark Magician as part of the fusion material. Now, a little kind of quick thing is that the card that you're summoning doesn't have to say Dark Magician in it, like some of the monsters we'll get to. As long as Dark Magician can be used as one of them, this card can be used to summon. I've heard a few people have a misconception about that. So, Starving Venom Dragon, for instance, who requires 2 dark monsters, you could use a Magician's Rod and a Dark Magician and summon that card, as long as you use that Dark Magician as one of the materials. So overall, great card. We'll get to the fusions later, and you'll see why this card is run. Running, obviously, like I said before, we run the Spellbook Engine. Again, classic, summon Blue Boy, add Spellbook of Secrets, search knowledge, tribute Blue Boy. Small package, again, gets what this deck wants to constantly just keep drawing. And, sometimes you don't have Rod in your hand for the normal summon, and you really just need to just normal summon Blue Boy just to get those searches. Again, more draw power, Allure of Darkness. Like I said before, everything you run in this main deck is dark except for the one Blue Boy. This card's almost never dead. It's easily one of the best cards in this deck. And, if you fear like you have to banish one of your Dark Magicians, this deck can make its plays with just 2. It can even technically make them with 1. So don't feel bad if you do have to banish one of your Dark Magicians off of it. And lastly, for the draw, right there, another Upstart Goblin. Draw a card, give your opponent 1,000. Who cares? Give them 1,000. 39 card deck. You can't go wrong with that. And last card, I do run the one recently limited Instant Fusion. We'll get to the monsters in the extra deck, and I'll show you why I run it, but I think it's just a fun little tech card and really helps the deck. So that's it for the spells. And now the traps. Eternal Soul. I run 3 copies of Eternal Soul. I know some players now opt to really only run 2. Either's fine. Again, it is searchable. Pretty much every Dark Magician spell and trap in here is searchable through either Circle or Rod. So, what does this card do? Well, it's the most loved and most hated card in Dark Magician. So, what this card does is it protects all your Dark Magicians from your opponent's card effects. Really strong, basically makes your vanilla monster actually have an effect. The downside, though, is if this card leaves the field, you have to Raigeki your entire board. I'm not sure why they added this, but it is what it is. And a little thing that I also want to give to any newer players that are picking up this deck, when this card leaves the field, if it's sent to the graveyard, if it's banished face up, if it's returned to your hand, you have to Raigeki your board. But if this card is shuffled back into your deck, like from Feather of a Phoenix or Queen Tiramisu from Madolche's effect, this card will not Raigeki your board. In order to Raigeki the board, the effect has to go off, but when a card is put back into the deck, it is no longer considered that card. So I know a couple people have been cheated out of games because of that, because their opponents, said, oh, your board's destroyed. So that's the ruling for it. You can't activate a card from the deck except for like a couple, like less than a handful of monsters can do that. So, just a little ruling for if you do play this deck and, someone tries to rule shark you on that. So what else does this card do other than protect your Dark Magician? Well, you can special summon a Dark Magician from your graveyard or hand, on your opponent's turn, on your turn, just constantly, like I said, recycling him. It has a secondary effect, too, that allows you to, instead of summoning the Dark Magician, you can add a Dark Magic Attack or Thousand Knives from your deck to your hand. No one plays Thousand Knives anymore, and Dark Magic Attack is a good side deck card. Altergeist are seeing more play. It's not bad. I wouldn't main deck it, but as a side deck card, it's perfectly fine. The last Dark Magician trap, the One Magician Navigation. Some people opt to cut this card. This card used to be a 3-of staple. Like I said before, when you wanted to keep adding Dark Magician from your deck to your hand, and then you'd summon them off of Eternal Soul or Navigation. Nowadays, again, it goes to the graveyard typically with Soul, and then you bring it back with either this Soul or, you'd rather it be in the graveyard than in your hand. It does nothing in your hand except for be like discard fodder for Apprentice. So if you do have it in your hand, though, what this card allows you to do is you can special summon one Dark Magician from your hand, and then you can special summon a level 7 or lower Dark Spellcaster monster from your deck. You can bring out another Dark Magician for a rank 7 play. You can bring out an Apprentice Illusion, trigger her effect, add another Dark Magician. It's a nice little plus there. But, overall, you'd much rather have it for its secondary effect, which is when this card's in your graveyard, other than the turn in which you activated its effect, which, most likely you won't be now, if your opponent activates a spell or trap card, you can target that card with this and negate its effect until the end of the turn. It's super good. Again, like I said, maybe they try to MST. Well, just simple example, your Eternal Soul, you have Dark Magician, use this to protect it by negating the MST. Again, you can cut this card if you want. It's not necessary, but I think it's a nice little form of protection. It's easy to send it to the graveyard, either with Apprentice's discard effect, Magician's Soul's discard effects. There's plenty of ways that you can just send it to the graveyard. Much better trap, though, to play is the Infinite Impermanence. Everyone knows what this card does. Target one face-up monster your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of this turn. If it's set, negate the whole row out when you target the monster. Great card. A fusion monster we'll get to makes this card even better. So, you can't go wrong with Infinite Impermanence. If you don't have, again, if you're newer and you're trying to build this on a budget, Effect Veiler works just as fine. It always has and always will. Last card, Skill Drain. You're playing a vanilla monster deck. Pay 1,000, negate all monsters' effects. Like I said, Dark Magician 2,500 isn't a lot to get over, but when a lot of decks rely on getting those bigger monsters from the extra deck, using their monsters' effects, this can really kind of stun them and hold them into place while your deck can just constantly build up that advantage. And that's it for the Dark Magician main deck. 40 cards, nothing too unordinary. And lastly, moving on to the extra deck. I run 2 copies of The Dark Magicians and 1 copy of Dark Magician the Dragon Knight. In my opinion, The Dark Magicians takes the place as the best Dark Magician fusion monster, taking that originally here from Dark Magician the Dragon Knight. So what does this card do? Well, you make it using Dark Magician and or Dark Magician Girl plus 1 Spellcaster monster. It's very easy in this deck. All monsters you run in the main deck are spellcasters -4. So what does this card do also? Once per turn, if a spell or trap or its effect, keep that in mind, is activated, except during the damage step. You can draw a card, and if it is a spell or trap, you can set that card, and if it's a quick play or a trap card, you can activate it the same turn. This is kind of why I like running Impermanence with this deck. It can be very helpful if, you summon this card, draw it, set the Impermanence, your opponent does something, you just go off and can use it. It's not dead. Really like that about it. And this second effect is why you run the Dark Magician Girl. When this card is destroyed, you can summon one Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl from your hand, deck, graveyard, any of those places. The reason you run her is because of that and. If this card gets destroyed and you just ran Dark Magician, you'd get nothing to replace it. You'd be left with your board possibly empty. This, being able to summon two monsters off of the destruction of this card, that destruction being from your opponent, maybe yourself from Eternal Souls being destroyed, that's why I feel like she's a necessary evil. I think she benefits this deck more than she hurts the deck. Might I also just kind of quickly pointing out too, that effect and the previous effect are actually not once per turn. So, you're never really going to get the second effect off once per turn, but that's also why I run two. You sometimes get them out, and, being able to just get that draw and then get that draw again off of the other one, really handy. Dark Magician the Dragon Knight, he's been in this deck for a couple years now. He's made by Dark Magician and a Dragon. You can either use your Phantasmes, you can use even the Destruction Sword if you want. What he does is his name is treated as Dark Magician while on the field or graveyard, and when he's on the field, he protects your back row, your Eternal Soul protects him, creates this nice little lock that rogue decks will have an issue getting over. And if you even attach Buster Destruction Sword to him through the Union Carrier we'll get to, he'll have 4,000 attack. Your opponent can't summon from the extra deck. He protects back row protects him. It's actually a really strong lock that can really only be taken out of by either a stronger monster swinging at him for an attack or like a kaiju or, monster removal that way. For the fusions, for my instant fusion target, I run both the Eyes Restrict monsters and Darkfire Dragon. This deck, like I said before, needs its combo pieces, but you don't really run Called by the Grave because there's just too many pieces to get this deck going. You'd rather just have that draw power just to try to get them. So what I like about Millennium Eyes Restrict is going first, you can pay that 1,000, summon him out. If they try to Ash Blossom your Rod, your Circle, your Soul Servant, your Magician Souls, whatever, you can just kind of negate the Ash Blossom and get away and keep going with that play. Secondly, if you do lose that die roll, you have to go second. Thousand Eyes Restrict is a good just turn two, just try to take your opponent's monster, do something with it. And they both also benefit from both being dark and spellcasters. So they even have a little bit of extra utility for that. The Darkfire Dragon, no effect on him, the old LOB monster, but he's a dragon. If you have the fusion card and you want to make Dragon Knight and you have the Dark Magician in your hand, pay the 1,000, bring him out, fusion into it. He's just kind of here for utility. It comes up sometimes and just gives you those options. Moving on to the rank 7 XCs, we have Ebon Illusion Magician, Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon, and number 11 Big Eye. So quickly, actually with Ebon here, I'll also put in the only other Xyz monster we run, the rank 6 Norito the Moral Leader. So Ebon Illusion Magician can be made using either 2 level 7 monsters, like the rest of these two up here, or it can actually be Xyz summon on top of a level or a rank 6 XC spellcaster monster, that being the Snorito. So what Ebon Illusion Magician does is you can detach a material from it to special summon your vanilla monster, in this case your Dark Magician, from the deck onto the field. And whenever your vanilla monster would battle an opponent's monster, once per turn, you can you just banish that monster. On top of banishing with Circle, banishing with him attacking, like I said, in the grind game, you can really start just like hammering away at your opponent's resources while you're just constantly building up yours. This deck really excels in that late game grind. Before getting to these two, all Narita Moral Leader is just 2 level 6 spellcasters. That's either your Dark Magician girl or your Apprentice Illusion Magician, if you have them. And, she has a good effect just once per turn. When your opponent activates a spell or trap effect on either player's turn, you can just detach a material, negate it. It comes up. Usually it's just kind of there to go into E-Bond, but ending on that isn't like a worst case scenario. Red Ice Flare Metal Dragon, end game rules going into time. If your opponent's just low on life points, just throw down Flare Metal Dragon. Watch your opponent burn themselves every time they activate a card by paying 500. It's just that kind of cheesy little burn card at the end. It's kind of this deck's cowboy for game in a way. And, a little fun thing on top of that, it can't be destroyed by card effects while it has Xyz material, so you're never actually going to detach it because that's more for just the Red Eyes archetype, but if your Eternal Soul blows up, hey, you at least have a 2800 monster. And number 11, Big Eye, probably the most classic of these monsters for the rank 7 pool. Detach a material, snatch, steal a monster. This card can't attack that turn. It comes up. Great card, great utility. And lastly, the links. I run the Link Spider, the Crowley, the Union Carrier we've talked about a few times already, the Wee Witch, and the Borreload. These 3 up here I really like. These 2 down here are kind of, you can just change them out for whatever you see fit. Link Spider's there in case, you only have 1 Dark Magician, maybe you have Eternal Soul and Circle out. You just want to kind of send that Dark Magician to the graveyard so you can summon him next turn to banish something. That's what Link Spider's for. Crowley, 2 spellcasters. He goes along with the Spellbook Engine. When he's Link Summoned, you just take the 3 Spellbook cards. Your opponent randomly chooses one of them. You add it to your hand. Hopefully you get the Blue Boy or the Spellbook of Secrets. If not, and you get Knowledge, well, you contribute him. It's not the worst thing. And Union Carrier, probably the best extra deck card in here. 2 monsters of the same type or attribute, super easy in this deck. Equip Buster Sword to anything in this deck and just kind of lock them out of their extra deck while also increasing that monster's attack by 1,000. Really strong lock. I've already praised it enough in this deck. Wee Witch Apprentice, again, everything in this deck is dark except for 1 card, so it's helpful. And if she does get destroyed, you can add 1 dark monster from your graveyard to your hand, maybe add Rod or something to use on your next turn. Again, she can be taken out, whatever you prefer. And Borreload Dragon, same thing, he can be taken out. I run him because a lot of removal from this deck is targeting. So let's say, you're having your classic Dark Magician versus Blue Eyes against your friend. Maybe he's running the Chaos Max. You can't out it with Circle. Really, the only way you can out it is Dark Magician, Apprentice Illusion, bringing him up to 4,500. So it's just kind of a way for those monsters that can't be targeted or destroyed by card effects or any of that. Really, again, the extra deck in Dark Magician can kind of be molded however you want. It's really not that strict. Some variants don't even really play that heavily into it. So it's entirely up to you. Anyway, that's my deck profile. I hope you guys like it. I know this video is long. I kind of wanted to go a little more in-depth with the cards again, because like I said, Dark Magician's that very popular deck that people returning back to the game really kind of just are drawn towards, and I'd rather kind of just explain everything a little more in detail so that way they can kind of just pick it up and don't have to kind of keep browsing around and rereading everything, can just kind of have one concrete video to watch it. Anyway, hope you like it. Thanks, and have a good day.